welcome back. And so this is the third part of the operator overloading. This is only for the people that are actually in the class and are doing the assignment. So the assignment for the operator overloading is you're going to be creating a string class that you get to do a lot of little fancy things with. For example, if you have your custom string class and you're multiplying it times 3, that is the equivalent of you duplicating your string 3 times. Of course, this is something that you cannot do with a normal string class, so it's actually extra features that you will be adding in, although you can do this in Python. That's probably where the idea came from. So because the hardest thing that I find students have with this kind of assignment is actually the initial reading in from a file of the input. People have a hard time doing that because you cannot use a string. I mean, yes, you could do cin string and that reads it in, but that's the point. You can't do that. And people then say, okay, I'll just use a cin a and a is a car. And yes, that will work. But the problem is this. As you're reading it in, you read in a letter, and then you process it, and then you're like, okay, this is a letter as part of the word, so I keep reading in, and then you see a space, and I'm like, okay, this is a space, so I'm done. That's cool. However, you've already consumed the space, and you may not necessarily want to do that. So this is just one of many ways that you can do to kind of help you in doing the assignment. Now, you don't have to do this at all, this cin peek thing. You don't have to do this. There's tons of things you can do. In fact, what I'm showing you here is not actually enough to do everything. It's just part of it to kind of get you going. So let me just walk you through this piece of code here. So we have a main function where I create a car pointer, and then I go ahead and assign this pointer to whatever the function read word returns, and then I print out the string, which is just a car pointer again, using another function. So let's look at the read function first, the read word. So here we are creating a temporary buffer per se, in the sense that I am going to make an array of characters of size 100, which is as big as the word can be. And there's always going to be a limit. You can't make it infinite because you don't have infinite amount of memory. And so from there, I want to go ahead and initialize that entire array of 100 with just the null terminators, which is the \0. And so I do that in the for loop. I could have also used memset, which will do the same thing, but then I would have needed to include the CString library. But I just thought FYI kind of thing. And so once I do that, I'm actually going to read in the next word in whatever string I have as the input. So I can use cin, and I'm reading in a single character, so that this is why it's a loop that's going to run up to 100 times, but not necessarily, because as you can see, this part will run up to 100 times, but I'm also doing this along with the end statement that's checking whether the next character is a white space, and if it is, then I stop there. And so this little function called cin peek, which is part of the cin, will look at the next character in sort of like the internal buffer, that is of the stuff that are left to read in, and it's going to basically look one spot ahead of where you're reading to see what's next. It's kind of like a preview, but it's not going to pull it out of this buffer. On the other hand, if you were just normally reading in, so like when you read this character, it pulls it out. So if you use it at that point, great. Otherwise, it's gone. Like you can't just magically put it back into the buffer. With peek, it's like looking ahead without pulling it out. So that's a useful function to have in general and to know. So I thought I'd bring it up because that's one way that you can get this going. At the end of the day, though, here, you will want to get rid of the empty spaces because you don't want to do anything with them. So you actually don't quite need it in this specific case. Only would you need it to check to make sure that it's not the end of the file. That's when definitely it would become very useful. Print on the other side, I thought I'd do something fancy to show you because this will kind of come in back to you when you do linked list. But the idea of instead of printing out an array with just a single loop where I'm accessing the index, I'm going to do it using pointers. So I create a character pointer that points to this other pointer, which is my string pointer, and then I have a little loop here that is going to run until PTR is pointing to a spot in the array that is basically just a null terminator, which of course means anything that's after the last word, the last letter read. And so I can print out that specific element by just couting PTR with the dereference operator. And after doing that, I go ahead and increase it by 1, which means it's going to go to the next spot in the array. And if I keep this loop going, eventually I'm going to print out all the letters and get to the null terminator.